Welcome to the UIUC Talkshow. Our goal with the show is to introduce you to the most interesting people with the most interesting ideas. Today we're having a conversation with Dr. Killeen. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So what do you do
I'll
today?
try to be interesting. We'll see.
What do you do today?
What did I do today? I had a whole set of meetings. I'm meeting with Ambassador Yanovich this afternoon, this evening, immediately after this. She won the Douglas Award last year, so we're going to greet her, and then there's an event tomorrow. We had a bunch of Zoom meetings. It's like life is filled with Zoom meetings, right? We had a meeting of the cabinet of the University of Illinois, which is always interesting, talking about all sorts of things. Enrollment, tuition, facilities, etc. So the sort of administrative components. A bunch of calls. It's just blur, actually. It's a blur now that you're asking me specifically, what did I do today? Every day is a little complicated. There's never one day that looks like any other day in this job that I have. It's kind of ranges from the magnificent, wonderful, fabulous, to, my goodness, what is that all about? And so it's like whipsawing a little bit from thing to thing, but it's great. This is an incredible university. So I try to avoid stepping on any landmines and supporting the students first and foremost, and making sure that the experience of students is great. And we want to work on that. There are issues of mental health that we're talking about as well. Some of the young people coming through have been sort of in the COVID era, a little bit isolated and so forth, and we want to make sure everybody feels welcome. I'm working on that. Those are the kinds of things that are on my list.
Right, and I think the reason why we like asking this question is because you get such interesting answers depending on who you're asking it to. And
all different, I'm sure.
Exactly, and what surprised me about your answer, and to an extent it's also understandable, it's more like it's filled with meetings, right? And you're doing more administrative stuff than like you have a background in physics, like you were a scientist, and even though you may not be able to practice it fully now, considering your current position, if you were a student today, what would you study?
Well, let me push back a little bit on not practicing physics today, right? So I think all of these professional pathways that you go through in higher education, post-secondary education, can illuminate your whole life, right? So physics has given me a base from which I kind of typically operate. It gives me, I look at data, I look at trends, I look at opportunities, I look at how things are working, metrics, etc. Not always solving equations on computers, but I could do that at pressed again. So the physics background was helpful to me in terms of what I bring to bear in terms of decision making at an administration level. So that's part and parcel of it. I could have arrived here from another path. I think the science and technology is perhaps good for quantitative reasoning and so forth, but it maybe is a little limiting in terms of discussion on the one hand, on the other hand, debate, judgment, discernment of issues. And so you try to learn, from where you are to where you need to get to pull these different skill sets together. So that's what actually enthralls me with my job. It's great. So I'm not leaving physics behind.
Okay.
Once a physicist, always a physicist. Once a mechanical engineer, always a mechanical engineer.
True.
So you never kind of lose it, but you can build and accrete different skill sets as you move through your, and be open to lots of other, issues and things that you can do, things that you can learn from others.
Did you always have like joining administration in your horizon, or was it something as a consequence? Okay.
No, that's a quick answer there. I would never have dreamed of being a university president when I was, going to college or at school, high school, or I wanted to be a soccer player, right? Manchester United was where I thought I could be a professional soccer player. Okay, I was soon disabused of that. Then maybe a musician. Okay, that didn't work out that well either. So I think life's a bit of a random walk process. And but it is thrilling to be contributing to an educational institution this great. It is wonderful because it automatically refreshes the young people coming through all the time. You're seekers of truth and knowledge. You disseminate knowledge. You work with teams, many interdisciplinary teams, and lots of partnerships that you can build. So it's a great place to be, to utilize whatever skills and talents you can bring to bear. So I think everything is relevant with this, and then it's on the good side of the force, if I can say that. I mean, we're not, on a day-to-day basis doing things that are going to damage the future, right? Environment, or we're trying to build human capacity at scale with excellence. That's a good place to be. It's a very satisfying place to be. So I'm happy in my job. Is it fun every day? I wouldn't say so. It's challenging, it's humbling, it's interesting, stimulating. Is it like something that you enjoy, like having ice cream in the evening or going to a game or something? But it is, you do feel like you're contributing. And if you do your best, that's all you can do, right?
And what still surprises you today? Like you've been in administration for a couple of years now. What's something that still surprises you and makes you want to wake up every day and do the job that you have?
I've been in this job as president of this university system, 3 universities now, for 7.5 years. Mm-hmm. So it surprises every day. If you think about, one thing pops to my mind, the way we handled the COVID pandemic was just fantastic. A lot of people worked generously, collaborated generously, gave of their time from all different fields to take on the issues to make sure that this was a safe environment for learning. So we didn't want to stop learning. We wanted to keep classes going. We knew we had to work on hybrid modalities so that people could Zoom and or whatever, distance educational things. That came together phenomenally well. And it's still surprising to me today that we did so well. Mm-hmm. We were providing millions of tests. We were doing as many PCR tests as most states in the country on a daily basis. We were informing the government on, whether it was asymptomatic transmission or symptomatic transmission. These were really important contributions to public health, safety, new knowledge, and technology, and not just the testing technologies, but the digital technologies that went with it. So where my mind is going with this, if we could pull that off in a crisis mode, right? It was a national crisis, and we looked around, and really there wasn't the cavalry on the hill coming to help us, right? We had to sort of do it ourselves. And not me as an administrator, but the talented faculty and the generous collaborators. If we could do that in a crisis mode, imagine what we could do if we operated at that pace. So what you ask, what surprises me, the potential at an institution like this is astonishing. Have we done more than scratch the surface? Yes, we have. We've got a great legacy of accomplishments. We've got great things going on now. We've got wonderful excellence, scale, innovative capacity. But how could we apply it to other grand challenges that we're facing? I think that's a question. If absent a crisis, if we had that sort of generous ability to roll up our sleeves and define a problem set and crack them, right, in service to society, that would be great. So it's surprising how well we did. A little surprised that other universities didn't quite, because it seemed like almost the bonehead thing to do, right?
Right.
There's the problem. This is what we need to do. We want to open our community up, so we need to know where the virus is in order to stop it moving, right? If you don't know where it is, there's not much you can do. So how do you get to know where it is? You have to test, you have to inform, you have to isolate rapidly, and you have to appreciate if the factors that give rise to transmission. And then we worked on the vaccines in Chicago as well. So all of that was just wonderful to see the capacity of this institution working in generous partnerships. Sorry, Juan David.
and that was one of the things that, like you said, like not other university had the courage to actually do that what was needed, and that capacity to do things fast and effective and actually getting things done.
Yeah. We were a little over our skis, a little
Right.
bending forward, right? But not too far
Right.
forward. Yeah. So
And
that's a good place
especially
to be.
as universities have become, slower, because it's a big place where a lot of decisions are slower, just like in the government where, in order to make a decision, it takes time. So seeing what the university was able to do in just a couple months was really impressive. But, universities have become filled with a lot of administrators. I'm not saying Illinois, but in general, it's been a pattern that has been happening for multiple decades. Universities have also hiked tuition for multiple decades. University of Illinois have not done that. That's something that is quite. I thank you for doing that, but also
You're very welcome.
also the Illinois commitment, which is also a great thing.
Yeah.
And so across the board, more administration, more tuition, a lot of the debt, which is you cannot declare bankruptcy because you cannot get rid of it, which creates an atmosphere for young people that it's hard because they cannot necessarily do the things they want to do. They will need to focus on doing that job that is high paying. Sometimes people say it's STEM, questionable, depending on a lot of the STEM majors don't have the demand that people say they have. So what's the outlook for, first, how do we get back to future in the sense of how do we get back to people actually doing things they want and not necessarily having this depth on the shoulder that, I think I want to try being a soccer player to play for Manchester United because maybe there's someone who's actually that good. But no, I want to have to do computer science because that's the thing. How do we get back to the future?
Well, you covered a lot of ground in that question, right? And you're touching on some things that are really important. And let me first of all congratulate both of you for being here at University of Illinois, because we are committed to affordability, which is key. You mentioned cost, right? You mentioned debt. To access, which means that we don't want the doors to be closed for young people who want opportunity and are ready to take advantage of those opportunities, but for whatever reason, socioeconomic, family circumstances, are unable to do that. So we want to open our doors wide. It has to be affordable. We're a public institution, and we want to operate at scale. So my simple mind is it's better to have two people get a world-class education than one person, right? So we want to create scale as well, large scale, lots of people having opportunities. So the University of Illinois is a good place on all of the fronts. We have frozen tuition 6 of the last 8 years, frozen, 0 increases in tuition for in-state residents and very minor for out-of-state residents. The 2 years we didn't, it was like 1.8%, so massively sub-inflationary. So there's a commitment here to affordability, which is important. And after we look at our graduates, they have less debt than national norms. They pay down their debt faster than national norms. They get better jobs or higher paying jobs than national norms. So we're on the right side of the force on all of these terms. But it is tough to be a young person coming into a setting like this where there are opportunities for sure, but there are impediments too. Cost is one thing. Not everybody gets a free ride. The Illinois commitment's one where, if a family earns less than a median salary, then the tuition is covered as a guarantee for that for 4 years. And we've increased our financial aid significantly, like almost, massively. It's now $260 million a year, which is more than the federal and the state combined. So we care. What I'm saying is we care about the things that you've raised. And you started saying, administration has grown and with sort of an implication that we're getting less efficient. We're working hard to get more efficient at this university. It's a complex system. We've got, dorms and cafeterias. We run an airport. We've got classes everywhere. We've got facilities. It's like a city in a way. We have 3 police forces that we operate on. We've got, janitorial services. We have to do all the financial aspects of new buildings like this beautiful building we're in now. That was not complex things. So you do need administrators to create the setting so that wonderful instructors and faculty have access to the kinds of capabilities that enable learning to proceed well, even in the depths of a pandemic. So with all of that said, this is a really fine institution. The way my mind works, there's this famous management book, You Want to Go From Good to Great. Maybe you've heard
Jim
of
Collins,
Jim
yeah.
Collins, okay? So for me, it's like, okay, we're great. What's next? We want to go from great to magnificent, because a public, research-intensive, comprehensive university in a state that's got a total of 95,000 students, right? It's like if it was a city, it would be the 9th biggest town in the state of Illinois. So we're big, we're excellent, we've got all of these relationships and partnerships, a legacy of contributions as long as your arm. I could list them. Sounds like you know them all, but
Probably more, yeah.
but maybe indoor air conditioning is one, right? Did you know that? First created here. So imagine, living in parts of India without indoor air conditioning. So transformative legacy contributions, and more to come, because society's facing a lot of challenging issues that your generation is going to have to, some of them left by my generation, right? That created some issues that are going to, resource constraints, still conflict resolution, obviously climate, and that's kind of my field, or geosciences, limitations on what can be done, and we've got to actually manage forward so that we can have human welfare writ large on a finite planet. My research was in sort of geophysics, so I care a lot about all these things. And for me, it's universities like this that will be the places where these solutions will be born and deployed into society. So you might say, well, what about Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc.? They don't have the same motivations. They're great, they can do things, they can, invest significantly, mergers, etc. But to have all of the disciplines, chemistry, mathematics, biology, physics, engineering, humanities, history, art, music, culture, dance, ethics, that family of disciplines, and with young people coming through all the time, is the recipe for problem solving. It's always been the recipe for problem solving. And to do that with this kind of spirit of generous collaboration, exemplified by COVID, really exemplified by COVID, is the recipe for taking on the challenges of the next generation and the one. I'm a new grandfather, so I care
Congrats.
as much about the one after your generation as this one. So thank you. So the coverage of the intellectual heft, the scale of it, the partnerships, provides a petri dish where we can kind of, what's the phrase, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. We have to invent, we have to create a healthful future going forward, where there are exciting jobs, professional pathways, opportunities to contribute, importantly, back. And education is at the core of all of that. It's at the absolute core of all of that. Education with new knowledge creation and dissemination. If you've got the skill sets, and so to have all of these skill sets, you just think about artificial intelligence, needs ethics. You need ethics. You need history. You need, I've obviously worked a lot in, geosciences, so sustainability was the thing that I really pushed when I was at the National Science Foundation. But if you think about sustainability, we could have a sustained, miserable future if we're not careful, right? It could be like the Blade Runner movie, if you've ever seen that, right?
Right.
Not exactly something we would want to aspire to. So we need a future where people can thrive, families can thrive, and there's sort of human welfare writ large, which means we got to take on health, we got to take on technology. We've got to take on partnerships, conflict. We've got to make sure we don't leave people behind in the dust with no opportunities, because that's how you create tension in society. Right. We're seeing that, still. So these are very honorable places to be. So getting back to, is it going downhill or is it spiraling down? The U of I is not. The U of I is going from great to magnificent.
And I think...
and you're going to be part of it.
That's right. And having your job is not an easy thing. I think you seem to enjoy it. I think you've been doing a good job. And we're both quite grateful to be at this place. And like you say, the place is not, it's like you said, like it's great, but it could be better.
It's not perfect, that's for
it's
sure.
Not perfect.
It's
and I think
absolutely.
that having that mentality, it's important because, like you said, universities could do things that no other big company could do. And I think getting back to, doing basic research and letting people do and kind of doing the type of things they kind of want to do and have that diversity, it's that will allow to get us back to the future. Another big issue that institutions, mostly in the U.S., whether government or institutions, is that the issue of trust. A lot of younger people have they usually mistrust like people who are in charge. Yeah. Personally, I don't think you are some evil person that is just like a puppet. Like, no, it's just a person, and that you're just part of this thing, and that you're trying to do your best to do that. One thing that a lot of people ask is about that, maybe not necessarily in front of your face, but online, on Reddit and stuff like that, is your salary. It's something that people ask a lot about, and to be fair, I don't think it's just like, oh, this guy, from what I saw, you're making $100,050 or whatever. People say, oh my God, what is he doing? He's doing a lot. First, your job is not easy, and from an economics perspective, it's about supply and demand. Not everyone wants to do your job. The other thing is that having this thing requires a lot of responsibility and a lot of things that no other person wants to have. And since we're committed to having a transparent, honest conversation and hopefully regain the trust of the younger people to show you're not an evil person, you're not you're a person who's doing your best. But that's a question people ask. Yeah. What do you have to say about that?
I have a lot to say about that. I think trust is critical in society, just generally. And I think trust in an institution like this, where you've got a lot of differences, you've got people who are, in the absence of information, you can assume the worst, right? And you look at differentials and you assume that there's something bad going on, that people are avaricious or doing things for, an intent that's not honorable or not based in the basic mission and the values of the institution. So, first thing to say is I don't set my own salary, right? There's a board of trustees that figures that out. They look at all of the other salaries and they, I've never, worried about that. My wife worries about it a little bit too, but I must admit. So, but it's not about, for me, it's not about the compensation. It's about the impact and the servant leadership. I think you don't build trust by being sort of the kind of leader that's looking for the next opportunity, right? You build trust by doing your job as well as you can, doing your very best with the circumstances that you're in. And, that's been part of what I've always done, whatever it was, when I was at your age, like a pound a day was the income stream, right? But I worked at it. I did my homework. I did my best. I got postdocs. I did my best. I got into research. I did my best. I was on committees. I did my best. So you kind of you move through society, I think, with that perspective. The best leaders, in my estimation, are servant leaders who it's not about themselves. It's about supporting the institutional mores and mission. And it's just wonderful to be at a university where it's such a good thing, right? We're not making widgets that damage things, right? So the motivation has to be, I think, optimally service. Even though a lot of academics, myself included, you want to be well known and highly regarded and go to conferences and people know your work and they cite your work and so forth. There's a competitive edge to all of that. You definitely want to be good and acknowledged for being good. People do in all walks of life, I think, seek acknowledgement for their contributions. I think it's the same with administrators, but the essence has to be service. And so now building trust in young people. I've got young kids, right? I mean, they're not young anymore. Baby's 25, so. But I think it's a big issue that you're raising, because without trust, some trust, you kind of get perverse engagements and interactions. People assume the worst. They splinter into factions. They critique, sometimes unfairly, what's going on over there without full knowledge. So there has to be a lot of communication to build trust. It takes a long time to build trust. It's very easy to rupture it. Just one thing, oh my goodness, I always knew, eyes roll, and then you suddenly lost trust and confidence. For me, it's a key ingredient to performance. I think graphically a lot. If you think about a y-axis with vision, right? There's high vision, low vision, and the other axis is buy-in, right? Ownership. That what you want to go from where you are today to some better place, higher vision, more performance, more effective. It's just as important to get the shared vision, the sharing of that vision, which is related to trust. Because if you're running up a hill and you're the leader and you say, come on, you look back, there's nobody there, then what's the point, right? So building that shared vision in settings like this are incredibly important. So leaders, no matter where they are in an organization like this, but particularly I would say at the presidential level, have to be optimistic, they have to be servant leaders, they have to be trying as hard to build the shared ownership, to create the shared vision, and that's built on trust, frankly. That's the currency for that, to achieve the greater good, right? So in COVID, we had trust. People trusted each other. They rolled their sleeves up. They worked together generously. Administrators were heavily involved in that because you had to do things that were out of the box to make that happen, and the outcome was very good. If you don't have trust, or if you don't have shared ownership, people tend to sort of minimize and start to complain as well about, in academia. This is a learning organization. Everybody's smart here. They're smart. So they're self-motivated, just like you two are self-motivated, right? You want to contribute, you want to do things. And what is it that will motivate that? Access to resources, ideas, opportunities, equipment to do things, interactions, discussions, conversations. Multidisciplinarity is going to be incredibly important because you've got to have the depth of knowledge in fields, but they've got to intersect because the problem sets are so you put your finger on something really important, think about it a lot, and you have to build trust over time. Now, what somebody gets paid is not an automatic disqualifier for anything, right? I mean, it's because if you want to figure out why, then you do your homework, right? And say, okay, well, Big Ten, what do they earn? And where does this stack up? And how can you attract great leaders to these important positions? Because if you have failures in leadership, frankly, it can be a setback for an institution. So all of this has to work well. It's a little nonlinear. It's like you've got to twiddle the thermostat and the knobs to make it all go well. But this is an amazing university. I'm honored to be in the job I am in. I'm not motivated by the salary. Now, my family is probably more so. But
you were a scientist and a professor and doing things that, if you really care about money, you would have been working in some industry job or.
Yeah, no, and I've turned down positions that would have been much more compensation. And in fact, I've done things to limit what they pay me, in terms of bonuses and things. And I said, no, I don't want to be paid for hanging around. Was
Right.
one of the things that
But
bothered me.
so the issue
But
of
it's-
trust.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you first.
So, is that this is a wonderful institution, and I think we need more trust between people like you and just us. Two students. We just sent you an email,
Right.
and I think thinking about how to just being more transparent and being where they are, I think is something that it will help the institution go from good to great, and great to
There you go.
magnificent.
You got it. You got my whole mantra.
If you needed
Yeah.
if you ever want to write a book, you should name your book "From Great to Magnificent."
Okay,
by
thank you. Yeah.
Timothy Killeen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's responsibility everywhere. It's not just unilateral responsibility, right? For the leadership to be trustworthy, right? Their trust is a currency. It's got to flow in all sorts of directions. There's no such thing as too much communication, but there's certainly such a thing as too little communication. So communication, transparency is incredibly important. So all the numbers of our performance, the debts of students have, all online, so people can look under the cover and see what's going on. Our finances are online. We get 3 Freedom of Information requests a day, typically. Every working day we get that. So people can look into the books and so forth. So transparency is important, communication is important. The shared vision is pivotal. And I think that we have some issues we need to work with your generation. There is a kind of a little dismay there, and maybe the pandemic has exaggerated it, but there's less optimism than there needs to be as we go forward. Optimism drives things. Success drives success. If you start minimizing where you are, or just going into a defensive crouch, the institution's not going to thrive. You may be sustained, but it's not going to thrive. I think there's a lot of responsibility on your generation, frankly, to take on life, and not just to be. There's plenty of time to be jaded in older, times.
Right.
There's plenty of time. There's lots of opportunity for that, but go for things. Assume good faith to begin with. When it's proven otherwise, don't assume it up front, right? Assume good faith. When somebody says something, believe it to begin with, right? I mean, you could be proved wrong. It wouldn't take many cycles to say, well, that's not something I want to follow.
Right.
But if you have an open heart and an open mind, you can. And actually, the other thing that I always tell my kids, and they laugh at me for this, is don't hoard credit. The moment you start hoarding credit, it's toxic. So we have a family motto. I hope my kids never see this because they'll laugh, and actually they'll get nuts because I say it too often. Shed the credit, because if there's never enough, right? If that's what you care about, it's like addictive, right? There's never enough. Somebody else is getting the credit I deserve, right? I need more. And then you get it, and oh boy, but I'm not getting that award or this thing or that. So shedding the credit for others who are in the team, it's always a we, actually in a strange way creates more respect for you as well. So it's a kind of a perverse way to get respect and to be acknowledged as a contributor. But if you start hoarding credit, everybody sees it. Smart people, they know it, right?
Right.
It's all about
Servant
himself
leadership.
or herself. Yeah, exactly. So servant leadership is in, and your generation has got to really buy into that, really, big time. The problem sets are there in front of us. They're not far out. They were in mine when I was your age.
You mentioned 2 things: optimism and responsibility. And I 100% agree with you. I told you I moved from Venezuela in 2016. I see a lot of my friends in high school. They're pressed. They're living in the best country in the world. Depressed, anxious, they don't really know what they want to do with their life.
There's a lot of anxiety.
I come to the U.S. with nothing, and I'm just so excited to be here. I'm so excited about the opportunities.
Yeah.
And that even led me to write a book about this optimism thing.
Yeah.
But something that you mentioned that is also important was the responsibility, is that if we see there's something wrong, whether with my class, with my institution, or whatever you are, it's about, not just assuming, the leader of X thing or the professor is
Right.
a horrible person.
Right.
Often that's not such a thing, and all of it is just asking and assuming, like you said, assuming good faith, because we're all good people trying to do good things. It's a matter of finding.
But you have to call things out. If you see something that's wrong, somebody's getting demeaned, harassed,
Sure.
unfairly treated, it's on all of us to try to rectify that. And the institution has to manifest that, has to not just say it, but has to manifest it so that everybody feels like they belong, right? That's the first order of business. Everybody should feel like they belong in an institution like this, no matter what clothing they wear, where they come from, what their religion is, what their sex is, etc. And I think that requires, it's like freedom, continuous, you don't just assume it's going to be great forever. You have to continuously show up and participate and exemplify and stand for the right things. I think leadership has to do that. It has to do that with optimism and with respect for people and not assuming the worst all the time, but calling things out if they're egregious is really important too. Because if you reward bad behavior, suddenly everybody says, oh, that's how I get ahead. It's
Cancel.
That's where you get to the magnificent. That's where you go to, that's where if you can get that shared vision, that spirit, and people are just, and I came to the States too as an immigrant. I am an immigrant.
Right.
For me, it was also kind of like an opening, a little bit like you described. Suddenly I've got this training background. I'm younger than everybody else because I had a PhD at an early age, and wow, they're listening to me. I can do that. Nobody's going to stop me.
Right.
Yeah, it's an amazing country. Yeah.
Best country in the world.
And I want to get back, and I want to get back through the University of Illinois, because I think Illinois is the size of the Netherlands, right? It's the size of a European country.
Mm-hmm.
It's in I'm waffling now, I'm going off, but it's in the middle of the country, right? The Midwest is if you added it all up, it's a third of the GDP of the United States. It's not the East Coast or the West Coast. There's more, entrepreneurial activity, but there's hard work, there's there's generosity and collaboration, great institutions. It's all the fresh water you could ever want, arable soil, clean air. We are just more bandwidth. There's more bandwidth around here than pretty much anywhere on. Maybe Bangalore's a different. I don't know, but we got a lot of bandwidth. And if you think about the efficiencies in commerce, right, businesses, it's all going to be about data and subsetting and visualizing and trend analysis and machine learning and artificial. Those are going to be important aspects. Bandwidth drives that. So we got all these assets in this part of the country, and it is open to the world. I just got back from Mexico, where we're opening offices there too. We need to build relationship with our neighbor to the south. We can learn a lot from those partnerships. So I think this part of the country, you said it better than I did, yeah. It's a great place. There's a great potential here. And the universities like this are particularly great because they're large. It's not bad to be large. To be small and selective is nice, perhaps, but to be large and excellent, that's where you get the impact.
We could be like the universities in the East Coast, that they only get their hype because of how selective they could be. I mean, they could easily open up.
When I get a call from a consultant says, I can help your University of Illinois become more selective, I say, that's not what I want. We want to be open and open doors and, person by person, family by family, transformational in our outlook. Yeah. So
Sure.
we want to be excellent too. We're not going to trade off excellence for scale. That is the key. So this is great. So congratulations for coming here.
But
I'm
again,
sure you had other options, right? Yeah.
yeah. But it's the same thing, right? Like you mentioned responsibility, and even your part, it's such a huge responsibility because you're not only responsible for this university, you handle two more, which is the Illinois system, right? So something that you mentioned is like how multidisciplinary everything is and how important it is to bring all these fields together, how to be so large but still be excellent at what they do. And I'm just curious to know like how, like you have a background in sciences, but you're managing a system which is so diverse and so multidisciplinary in what it does and the kind of people it motivates and like brings up. How do you know that you have enough context to run this system efficiently?
You get on the road and you interact all the time. So I'm in Chicago pretty much every week. I'm working with obviously the administration, but you want to gain as much insight and knowledge and contacts as you can. But it's not just on me, right? It's
Right.
servant leadership is sort of, you are a little bit of an
Like
enabler.
a well-oiled system.
It's not even a conductor. You're an enabler. So the point is to open doors of potential and then to encourage passage through those doors. Multiple things I'm excited about in Chicago. University of Illinois Chicago. It's $450 million annual now. It did the vaccines for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. It did the HIV-resistant, drug-resistant therapeutic that really saved zillions of lives in sub-Saharan Africa. It's done the Shingrix vaccine, which we all need, certainly at my age. So it's robotic surgery, incredibly high levels of teaching, training the world surgeons on how to do robotic surgery, multi-organ transplant. There's thing after thing after thing. It's where social work started, right? In a way, the Jane Addams Hull House was the original sort of thinking about how to do. It wasn't called GIS then, but it was basically how do you do a spatial analysis of where people living and what their needs are, and so it was a social work perspective. Again, it's grounded in social good. Fabulously, very diverse. It's a Hispanic serving institution. So I speak Spanish in commencement. I'm going to do it again next week. It's in a world city called Chicago. It's the biggest university there. It's a fabulous place, but it's different from UIUC. It's kind of urban. This is Big Ten. They have sort of different. It's got one of the biggest medical schools in the country. It trains more Latino physicians than any other institution anywhere. Nurses, pharmacists, social workers, public health. So on the healthcare side, it's, I think, incredibly important. You're talking about big problem sets. You think about healthcare, and you go from sort of healthcare, hospital, curing things in ER rooms, which is very expensive, by the way, to preventative care in communities. How do you do that with digital metrics, with interprofessional attention? How do you do it for underserved communities where there's not enough socioeconomic heft? So we look after homeless under bridges, and we never turn anybody away from the hospital. We have the state hospital at UIC. And all of this can interact with other things. We have rural health as well as urban health. There's engineering there. There's a fantastic mechanical engineering new facility we just built with big cantilever beam structures that can be instrumented. So I could go on and on and on. Springfield's the same way, public policy, looking at the legacy of Abraham Lincoln and all the writings there, and the history, public policy, again, social entrepreneurship, social innovation is taking place there. So we have like almost a perfect system where each one is distinctive, different, suited for some individuals more than others. Some like this, intimate feel of a UIS campus. Some like the big city, some like the Big Ten kind of setting here with the football and everything that goes along with UIUC. So having them interoperate, actually interworkability. I prefer language is important, right? Interoperation is one thing, but interwork, so you're actually able to do things, not just able to transfer data sets around and plot them up, but actually take on problems and solve them, is very interesting. So in the next 3 years, we're going to be recruiting 300 new faculty, net new faculty, because our enrollment has grown, because we kept our costs down. We've got 95,000 students. When I arrived, it was 85,000 students, so we've grown like over 10,000 students. It's like we've added another university. Now we need to recruit faculty. And that generation of new faculty, these are not replacements for retiring faculty. These are net new faculty. If they have the right kind of shared vision again of taking on the world, right, through teaching, learning, and research, it's going to be like a once in a generation opportunity. So we're going to take that. So I'm driven to do that. That's what I want to see happen. And we are recruiting great individuals now. I could give you chapter and verse on that too. So recruiting is important, retention, facilities, buildings, roads. We have a whole innovation ecosystem. It's called the Discovery Partners Institute. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. That's taking off. That's on, there's 60 acres of empty land in the world city called Chicago that we can create a solutions capital for the planet. I'm excited about that. So, yeah, there's a lot to work on.
I think that brings us to a very important point, which is how, even though we're so focused on the present, it's still very important to focus on the future, because we're in the middle of building something. We're building technologies that is for the future. We're innovating. We are working for the future. So I want to ask you, what's your vision for this university and
for this university?
The system? Yeah.
I think this is, as we said, I'm sold on this place, right? When I first arrived,
right,
I said, where do I sign? I wasn't looking at what the dollars were, but I was in awe of the university. I knew more about UIUC because I'd been for many years at University of Michigan,
right,
and sort of in the engineering group. They were kind of competitive peers, so I knew a lot more. I learned about the other two universities pretty quickly. I think the future is very bright for public, comprehensive research universities that have excellence and scale. Those are and generosity and collaborative spirit, right? The partnerships that we're talking about with a global perspective. And obviously emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that nobody gets left behind, right? We can lead, not just be ranked, right, according to somebody else's list. We can lead and develop the kind of solution sets that the world needs. Food security, healthcare delivery system, therapeutics, pandemic management, urban design, food. I mentioned food, but climate science is going to be incredibly important. Resiliency, adaptation, mitigation. These are all big things that are going to need multidisciplinary. It's also going to need computation, digital skill sets, because the world's a complex, nonlinear place, and when you add human decision making into these biophysical issues, it gets even more complicated. You've got to have agent-based modeling. So that's why bandwidth for me is important. Computational is important. Ethics is important, so that you've got to preserve privacy and all of these things as you move forward. Corporations that solve problems. I think the whole financial fintech is a huge arena that we can contribute massively to. Again, through partnerships. So when we talk about Discovery Partners Institute, the P is partners. So even though it may sound like we could do it all, right? And maybe part of me wants to do it all, the competitive edge, but I think it's all going to be through partnerships. So we're going to partner with Mexico. UNAM is a big university there, partnering with Singapore, we're partnering with Middle East, we're partnering with Europe, we're partnering with India, and in ways that sort of create almost a self-similar collaborative spirit to take on issues and solve problems. And then every year we graduate another little town, 25,000 graduates. I've shaken a lot of hands in my time, put a lot of things on people.
You have some muscle now.
little muscle. So it's a lot of people. And we've got over 700,000 living alums around the world. And they're paying attention. Most of them, or many of them, are paying attention to what's going on here. So it's a special place as well. It's got this grounded perspective. We call it the land grant mission. You know what that is,
right?
Obviously, so that's to provide opportunities for students of all walks of life and all socioeconomic backgrounds to gain access to civil society and good livelihoods. So doing that and creating new knowledge that takes on the toughest challenges that the world faces is what we have to do. It's like a responsibility. I'll just give you an example. I do a state tour every year. So this year we did about 1,500 miles up and down the state, visiting lots of places. We've got it's not just in our communities where we have campuses, but we've got extension everywhere. On Shield, Illinois, we were in 1,700 schools. So we've got presence all across the state and beyond. There are issues of life expectancy, gradients in life expectancy. If you go from, say, DuPage County to Saline County in the southern part, 8 years difference. People live 8 fewer years in some of these rural counties, right? That's in the year 2022, and it's kind of on our watch, and it's certainly on your watch, right? How do you take care of those kinds of things? And it's access to healthcare, preventative, good nutrition, access to educational opportunities, schooling, transportation, logistics of all kinds. It's like engineering a future that works for families and for communities. And then you just go 6 miles across Chicago, you'll see the same life expectancy challenges. Those are real today's challenges, right, on healthcare delivery, a healthful society. You have a health, then, what is Martin Luther King said, the most important thing is health. And health inequities are the most sobering kinds of issues. So let's take that on. We've got the rural health expertise, we've got the physicians, we've got the social workers, we've got the presence up and down the state. We've got the mission, which is the land grant mission of doing that. So it's not this sort of, we want to be ranked higher than Oxford, right, anything like that. So I'm pretty excited. I think we've got the wind in our sails. And getting back to what you said, Juan David, the trust is important. Without that, people are not going to give their psychic energy to anything, right? They're going to say, well, what can I do for me, right? And that's not the servant leadership that's going to be needed to take these issues on and solve them. So you might say, well, why don't you do it in a company? Okay, I looked at that, but I don't think companies have this. They have the quarterly shareholders and stock prices. Those are pretty important, and understandable drivers for what happens. We've got 155 years going here. We've got a tradition, we've got a presence, we've got excellence, and I think we're actually moving in the right direction. We've come through some difficult passages. There was a budget impasse, then the pandemic, and so forth, but I think we're moving.
I'm also excited, and
we're moving.
Getting back to what universities should be about, and I think University of Illinois is doing a great job. So that's what you do during the day, all this thinking, but you also have a personal life. So once you get off, when you go back to your house, what do you do for fun? What do you do to get all the stress off? Do you still play soccer?
I do play the guitar. I play classic guitar. Yeah, it's kind of one thing, I don't know why, but I always wanted to do something difficult so that I could do something fun. That seemed like the way it was, if I can practice on this, then I can play for Manchester United, right? Or if I
Right.
learn classic guitar, then I could be in a rock band. That would be easy afterwards, right? Like, I never graduated to any of these things, right? So, but I do classic guitar, and I've been doing it for a long time, and it's become a bit of a shtick around here. So we do a hokey Christmas video. It'll have me playing the guitar.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
those. Like the background is always nice.
Yeah,
in
the
those,
background is, I do that, yeah. So that's definitely a stress release. I'm learning a piece now that by Barrios Mangore, a Paraguayan guitarist. Just a fabulous piece, right? I mean, if you get into these disciplines, right, enough, you see, whoa, well, that's brilliant, right? How did they do that? How could these musicians or these composers create such amazing, or writers, or poets, or historians, or mechanical engineers, or everything is kind of redolent of human vitality.
Right.
Right. So getting close enough that you can see into that is something I really enjoy doing. If you can, I'm reading Spanish poetry, Garcia Lorca, amazing stuff. Where did that come from? Yeah. How was that all about? So I think just exploring, learning is really a piece. But family life, of course, is everything, right, to me. So, yeah, we got a grandson. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's like a Facebook relationship, but what the heck?
How old is he? Like 2 years old or something?
He's 10 months, yeah.
10.
10
Oh, wow.
very
So it's
recent.
very
He's
recent.
not even walking yet.
Just as old
they're
as the
standing
show.
up, but- what's that?
Just as old as the show.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I do exercise, and I live in the president's house here, which backs on the Arboretum, so I can just kind of stagger out in the mornings and go a 3-mile run, and then come back and get ready for work. So that really helps. I try to do that as often as possible. Yeah.
People play soccer by the arc. You should go.
Well, my knees
one
are
of the
hurting,
days.
just as you mentioned.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. I'm too competitive. I would play too hard, and I would hurt myself in
Yeah.
like the first 10 minutes. I predict.
Maybe you can play for 5 minutes. But
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah. It's fun to watch the World Cup, though, isn't it? I mean, the touch these guys have, it's just amazing. Right?
it's like you say, like how do they, like, once you know enough to appreciate how well they do what they do, is just something that is
Yeah, I mean, the diagonal things where it's over and there's just one little touch and they're moving in the right direction. It's just amazing, yeah. So human beings are capable of a heck of a lot of wonderful things. So now we got to take on some big challenges and create the human capital capacity to do it. And let me leave you with this, maybe, if I can. I don't know how we're doing for time. But,
Yes. Will be done.
So I came up through physics and then went into the geosciences. And I've always felt something about geology, the word. It's Greek, of course. Geo, logos, earth, wisdom. That's a pretty interesting combination right there. The planet is the platform for human life, okay, and we kind of have to take care of it. Human life is complex. Human beings do crazy things sometimes, and etc. So the relationship of humanity with the planet and the other forms of life, I think, is central to our future, our common future. If we don't take those things seriously, we will go from crisis to crisis. And so a lot of what I've been doing, is in that arena. We did, climate system modeling, earth system modeling, et cetera. And I think that family of issues is going to need mechanical engineers, it's going to need entrepreneurs, it's going to need historians, it's going to need the whole gamut of capacity. But it's got to be people who are going to put their energy into it, their real energy into it, and maybe not just on video games, but on actually taking on the world, right? So I think the Greeks, geo, logos, that's where I've always tended to end up, right? Now, in a university setting, it's an interesting place to be because we've got geology departments, we've got geography departments, we've got all the other STEM fields, we've got incredible engineering, we've got wonderful humanities, we've got performing arts, we've got the whole thing right here at a very, very high level of capability. And people like each other. And I think they trust each other. I think increasingly they trust each other. Not everybody all the time, and there'll be events and issues and circumstances where, some of that gets hurt, but it's a negative if that happens. So part of the job, I feel, is to be optimistic, to be outbound, to be leaning forward, not leaning back in a defensive setting. And I think it's working so far. So our budget went up from the state. Hey, okay.
Not
First
so bad.
time in 20 years or so, yeah, okay. So, and that helps. We're building buildings. We've built this building,
Right.
right? I was involved in this, talking to the principal donor, who's another visionary, alum, and here it is, up and running. So I think if you have a vision and you have shared vision, magic can happen. Yeah.
With optimism and responsibility and having that great vision, we'll go from great to magnificent,
There you
not
go.
only in the institution, but also in our personal lives.
And yes, okay,
You changed
very
the
good.
world.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks for the time. Good questions. Good job.
Thank you for coming.
See you at graduation, if not before, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, good.
we'll be there.
Yeah, you had to be there on time.
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed getting more context about how everything happens behind the scenes. I would like to sincerely thank President Killeen for taking the time to come here and sharing all these insights and all these little things that we don't usually think about when we're just studying in classrooms or just walking around on campus, but trying to appreciate everything that we have that we might take for granted at times. This is a great place to be, and there's so many opportunities brimming around us with people. And if you think about it, this is like the perfect place to do anything. You have, as you mentioned, this is a collection of the greatest minds from around the world. We have geology departments, engineering, science, arts, music, everyone all in the same place. And if you just think about the potential that surely exists in this little town, it just blows my mind, and the possibilities that exist. So thank you so much for this realization, sharing all these interesting stories and your ideas with us. And I hope people can take this forward with optimism, responsibility, and focus on the future and have a great time at this campus. So thank you once again.
Okay,
Awesome.
very good.